Hey guys, welcome to distance midpoint, division point, three formulas involving points on the Cartesian plane. This is the pretest, assignment number 05. We'll do another one before the test, but here we go. This first question says, Alicia wants to see one direction, God knows why, at the Bell Center, which is located at 90, negative 40. So it's always nice to stop and take a second and take a look at where that Bell Center is. I made it nice for you. I called it B for Bell Center. But that's where she wants to go. And you'll see that the location of the point is right there. But first, she must pick up Sarah at negative 30, negative 20. So Sarah's over here at S, as you would expect, negative 30, negative 20, and of course, Alicia's house, 60, 70. So the question says, she leaves her house, picks up Sarah, then arrives at the show in time for the first act. How far must Alicia drive? And round your answer to the nearest tenth of a unit. So if you think about it, there are really two calculations we're going to have to do here. Alicia is first going to drive to Sarah's house, which will have a particular distance. And then she's going to go from Sarah's house to the Bell Center, which will have its own distance, right? She could go from her own house directly to the Bell Center. That would obviously be faster, but she has to pick up her friend first. And so for the purposes of our calculations, we're going to have two that we need to do. Straight up distance problem. So I'll remind us of the formula that distance is equal to big long square root there, and then we always write x2 minus x1, close those brackets, squared, plus y2 minus y1, close those brackets, and square that off. It's also nice to take a second to indicate what distance we're actually calculating. So this particular problem has the distance from A to S. So I'll write DAS equals, and then I'll put that formula in. But before I do it, I just want to remind you that for this part of the calculation, point 1 will be 60, 70, 60, 70, sorry. And P2 will be Sarah's house, negative 30, negative 20. So we can now remember that this is x1 and y1, and this is x2 and y2. That's going to change when we do these points over here. This will no longer be needed. We'll be using these two, and we'll change up our P1 and our P2. So x1 is 60. So we're going to open up that bracket and write down 60 minus negative 30. I always put those negative numbers in a little tiny bracket inside the bigger brackets, squared, plus y2, negative 20, minus 70, all squared. That's a positive 70, so just minus a regular 70. So we're subtracting a negative over here. So that distance is going to equal square root of, I'm going to simplify inside the brackets as per Bedmans, brackets first, 60 minus negative 30 is 60 minus negative 30 is 90 squared, plus negative 20 minus 70, I happen to know this one, is negative 90. But if you want to check, negative 20 minus 70 more, negative 90. Don't forget the squared. So we're going to simplify inside those brackets. We've done that. Now we're going to square. So 90 squared, 90, forgive me here, I've got to go ahead and get my square button. And 90 squared is 8100. Plus negative 90 squared. Now, very important, when you go to square this negative 90, different calculators will do this differently. But you have to use those brackets if you don't want to make a mistake. So I'm going to go open brackets. Now, you don't see the bracket on my phone calculator. On your regular calculator, you will. But that's the open bracket. Then I'm going to go negative 90. Make sure you get that negative in there. Then close the bracket and then square it. You need to get a positive 8100 there. If you're getting negative 8100, what's happening is you're squaring the 90 and then the calculator is making it negative afterwards. Remember, this is negative 90 times negative 90. That's all the square is. Think of it this way, right? Negative 90 times negative 90 is positive 8100. So you make sure that that negative is getting squared with the brackets. That comes to 16,200. Now, remember, I want to get rid of the square root last, so I have to go ahead and take the square root of 16,200. 16,200, and then square root. And you get 127.27. Now the question says round it to the nearest tenth. Nearest tenth is one decimal place. So 127.27. I want to go 127.2, that's the tenth, but I have to look at the number previous. That's a 7. So 5 or more rounds up. Right? 4 or less stays the same. So if this was a 4 instead of a 7, this would be 127.2. But since it's a 7, the 2 becomes a 3. 127.3. So that's, whether it's in meters or whatever, that's the distance Alicia has to travel to get to Sarah's. Now we got to get from Sarah's to the Bell Center. So we do the second set of calculations, which is the distance formula again. I'm not going to rewrite the formula this time because we have it on the top of the paper already. Bear with me. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to redo the distance formula, but my P1 and my P2 are going to change. My P1 is now Sarah because I'm starting from Sarah's house. So P1 will be negative 30, negative 20, and my P2 will be equal to 90, negative 40, because that's the Bell Center. That's where I'm going. P1 is always where you start, and P2 is where you're going to end up. And in distance, it doesn't really matter, truthfully, which one is which, because the distance from S to B is the same as the distance from B to S. But for the other formulas, it really matters where we start, so, or at least for the locate a point formula. So it's a good habit to get into. Your starting point is your P1. Square root. So x2 minus x1, so 90 minus negative 30. So open the brackets. 90 minus negative 30. There's my double bracket. Close it. Squared plus y2 minus, x2 minus x1 plus y2 minus y1, negative 40 minus negative 20. And that, when you do it, 90 minus negative 30 on your calculator, you should get 120, positive 120, which will be squared, plus negative 40 minus negative 20, right? Negative 40 minus negative 20 is going to give you negative 20. Squared. We've got to make sure we square that negative. 120 squared is 14,400. Sorry. Yes, 14,400. And negative 20 squared is positive 400. You do that on your calculator. You make sure that you're squaring that negative. Use those brackets. Or negative 20 times negative 20 if you prefer. You should get a positive there. That's going to be 14,800, which once you take the square root of that, 14,800 square root is going to give you 38.47. Whoops, I did something wrong there. Clear that up. 14,800. There we go. Square root is 121.65. I want one decimal place. So 0.65 becomes 0.7. And now, all I have to do to answer the question at the end of the day is when I want to say how far she drove this distance plus this distance. So the total distance is equal to 127.3 plus 121.7. And when you add those numbers together, you should get 249 kilometers. That's one heck of a drive to go see one direction, if you ask me. But there it is. We'll come back to take a look at number 2 in a second.